Have you ever noticed this strange moment? You're halfway through a sentence, maybe at work, at dinner, or in a casual conversation, and suddenly, someone talks over you. Just like that. Your words vanish mid-air. And in that split second, something inside you snaps. Your heart rate jumps. Your face gets warm. And almost automatically, you feel the urge to speak louder, faster, sharper. Anything to reclaim the floor. Most people don't even realize they're doing it. Fight to be heard. Fight to exist in the conversation. But here's the uncomfortable truth no one likes to admit. The harder you fight for airtime, the smaller you look. Raising your voice doesn't make your point stronger. Speaking faster doesn't make you more confident. In fact, it often does the opposite. It signals tension, insecurity, a loss of inner control, and the room feels it, even if no one says a word. This is where Stoic philosophy draws a hard line. Stoicism does not teach you to win conversations by overpowering others. It teaches something far more unsettling to the ego. Never fight noise with more noise. Because noise is chaos, and chaos always consumes the one who reacts emotionally to it. The Stoics believed that real power begins internally. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, and Epictetus, once a slave with nothing but his mind, both emphasized this idea. You cannot control other people, but you can always control yourself. And that control is where dignity lives. So no, this video isn't about clever comebacks or verbal dominance. It's not about embarrassing the person who interrupted you. That kind of victory is shallow and fleeting. This is about something deeper. It's about learning how intentional silence can shift the entire dynamic of a conversation. How pausing, rather than reacting, can quietly place you back in control. And how maintaining composure, even when disrespected, protects the one thing that actually matters, your inner stability. Think about it for a moment. Who do you trust more? The person scrambling to be heard, or the person who speaks calmly, deliberately, and only when it matters? Stoicism chooses the second path. And once you understand it, you'll never hear interruptions the same way again. I'm sorry, but there's nothing to say here. Could you provide more context or a specific text to read aloud? When someone constantly interrupts, most people assume it's because that person is confident, dominant, or powerful. But Stoic philosophy invites us to look deeper, past the surface behavior and into the psychology underneath. In any conversation, there are usually two archetypes at play. The first is the insecure interrupter. This person is deeply uncomfortable with silence. To them, a pause feels like danger, like they're being forgotten. So, the moment there's a gap, even half a second, they rush to fill it with their voice. Not because they have something meaningful to add, but because silence threatens their sense of importance. They interrupt to feel seen, to feel relevant, to feel in control. And over time, they start to confuse quantity with authority. They believe that speaking more equals being more powerful. Louder means smarter. Faster means dominant. But in reality, it's often the opposite. What you're witnessing isn't strength. It's anxiety wearing a confident mask. Now contrast that with the second archetype, the Stoic observer. The observer doesn't rush. They don't tense up when interrupted. They don't feel the need to immediately reclaim the floor. Why? Because they understand something most people never learn. Real power doesn't compete. It remains steady. The Stoic observer is comfortable with silence. They know that silence is not emptiness. It's space. And whoever is calm inside that space holds the advantage. Think about the most grounded person you've ever listened to. Chances are, they didn't speak constantly. They spoke deliberately. When they paused, the room leaned in. When they spoke, people listened. Not because they were loud, but because their presence carried weight. Stoicism teaches that emotional reactivity is a form of surrender. The moment you let someone else's behavior dictate your internal state, you've handed them control. The observer refuses to do that. They stay rooted, unmoved. And here's the quiet truth most people miss. The interrupter is fighting for attention. The observer already has it, without asking. Once you understand this binary frame, interruptions stop feeling like attacks. They become signals. And instead of reacting instinctively, you begin responding strategically, with calm, clarity, and unshakable self-respect. That's the Stoic advantage. I'm here to help. Just let me know what you'd like to do next. Most people misunderstand what really happens when they're interrupted. They believe that the moment they stop speaking, they've lost. That silence means surrender. That pausing equals weakness. Stoicism flips that belief upside down. Stopping your sentence is not defeat. It's a tactical decision. When someone cuts you off, you have two paths. The first is the one most people take. You push back. You raise your voice. You speak faster, trying to force your way back into the conversation. And what happens? Chaos. Two egos colliding. Two voices overlapping. The room doesn't hear wisdom. It hears noise. And in that noise, dignity disappears. The second path is far quieter and far more powerful. You stop. Instantly. Cleanly. Without irritation in your face. Without tension in your body. This is what Stoics would call weaponized silence. Not passive silence, not defeated silence, but silence chosen with intent. In that moment, something interesting happens. You hand the spotlight entirely to the person who interrupted you, but you do it while they're unprepared to hold it. Suddenly, all eyes are on them, and with no resistance to push against, their behavior becomes obvious. The rushing, the rambling, the lack of structure, the rudeness they thought was invisible is now exposed. You didn't attack them. You didn't embarrass them. You simply allowed reality to reveal itself. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, captured this idea perfectly when he said that human beings were given 2 ears and 1 mouth, not to silence us, but to remind us that listening is a form of strength. The compulsion to speak, to interrupt, to dominate every pause, that's not power. It's a leak in self-control. True authority doesn't rush to be heard. It waits, it listens, and when it speaks with weight. So the next time someone cuts you off, don't rush to reclaim the floor. Let the silence do the work for you. In that quiet space, disorder exposes itself, and composure quietly takes command. Before we talk about what to say, or whether to say anything at all, we need to build what the Stoics understood as an emotional logic bridge. Because without the right internal goal, even the smartest words become weapons turned against yourself. Let's be clear about something uncomfortable. If your goal is to win the argument, you've already lost. If your goal is to humiliate the other person, you're no longer in control, you're reacting. Those goals feel satisfying in the moment, but they come at a hidden cost. They hand your emotional steering wheel to someone else. Now your mood, your tone, and your peace depend on their behavior. That is not strength. That is quiet captivity. Stoicism offers a different objective. The real goal is not dominance, protection of what the Stoics would call your inner citadel, your mental sanctuary, the one place no interruption, no insult, no disrespect should ever be allowed to enter without permission. Epictetus, who endured slavery, poverty, and public humiliation, made this painfully clear. You do not control what others say or do. You never have, and you never will. But you always control how you interpret it and how you respond. When someone interrupts you, and your first instinct is to strike back, pause and ask yourself one simple question. Am I about to speak to prove something, or to preserve something? Because mastering your tongue is not about silence for silence's sake. It's about choosing words or choosing quiet from a place of authority, not impulse. When you respond calmly, you are not letting them get away with it. You are refusing to let their lack of control infect yours. And here's the paradox. The moment you stop trying to win emotionally, you start winning psychologically. You become steady, unrushed, grounded. Your words, when they arrive, land heavier. And even if no one else notices immediately, you do. You've protected your inner ground. You've remained sovereign over yourself. And in Stoicism, that is the only victory that actually lasts. Method 1. Intentional yielding. When yielding becomes strength. Most people think that when you step back in a conversation, you're giving something up. Status, authority, respect. But Stoicism teaches a counterintuitive truth. Sometimes the fastest way to regain control is to stop fighting for it. When someone interrupts you, the instinct is to push back, to hold your ground, to prove that your words matter. But the Stoic notices something first. This person is eager to speak, and instead of resisting that energy, the Stoic redirects it. You pause. You stop mid-sentence. Calmly, intentionally, and you allow them to speak. This isn't weakness. This is deliberate yielding. By doing this, you instantly dissolve the tension they were pushing against. The interrupter expects friction. They expect competition. When they don't get it, their momentum collapses. The emotional charge disappears. And without resistance, their interruption loses its power. At the same time, something subtle but important happens in the room. You signal confidence. You're essentially saying without words, "I'm secure enough in my position that I don't need to rush. I can wait." That message lands deeply, especially with mature audiences, because adults don't scramble for attention, children do. And by choosing to wait, you position yourself as the emotional adult in the conversation. This tactic also reframes the dynamic. The spotlight shifts fully onto the interrupter. Now they must carry the weight of the moment alone. If they ramble, rush, or contradict themselves, it becomes obvious. Not because you exposed them, but because you gave them space to reveal themselves. And here's the key Stoic insight. You never abandoned your point. You simply postponed it. You allowed order to return before continuing. That's not retreat. That's strategy. In a world where everyone is desperate to be heard, the person who can pause without anxiety commands quiet authority. Yielding, when done consciously, is not submission. It's composure. And composure, as the Stoics knew well, is one of the clearest signals of real power. Method 2. Calm fairness, drawing a clear, quiet boundary. One of the biggest myths about Stoicism is that it teaches passivity. It doesn't. Stoicism teaches measured action. Action without emotion, without escalation, without ego. When someone interrupts you, there are moments when silence alone isn't enough. Not because you're offended, but because order needs to be restored. And this is where calm fairness becomes a powerful tool. Instead of reacting emotionally, you pause, you look at them, and with a steady tone, you signal something simple. They can speak, but not at the cost of erasing you. This approach reframes the interaction as a matter of balance, not conflict. You're not accusing them, you're not attacking their character. You're quietly reminding everyone in the room, including them, that conversations have structure. And structure is calming. People instinctively respect fairness when it's presented without hostility. By allowing them to finish their thought while calmly reserving your place in the conversation, you establish an invisible contract. We both get to speak. This does two things at once. First, it removes emotional heat. There's nothing to fight against. No raised voice, no tension, just clarity. Second, it sends a signal to everyone listening. You are organized, composed, and intentional. You didn't forget your point. You didn't lose it. You're simply choosing the right moment to continue. That matters more than people realize. In group settings, meetings, discussions, even family conversations, authority often comes from who can hold their position without forcing it. When you calmly mark your turn, instead of scrambling to protect it, you demonstrate confidence under pressure. And confidence like that doesn't shout, it settles the room. The Stoics understood this deeply. Justice and fairness weren't abstract virtues. They were practical tools for maintaining inner order and external respect. By responding this way, you protect both. You're not demanding attention. You're earning it quietly. Method 3. Total silence, advanced weaponized silence. This is the most misunderstood and most powerful tool in the Stoic arsenal. Total silence. When someone cuts you off, your body wants to react. A sigh, a frown, a glance away. Even those small gestures leak emotion. And emotion is exactly what the interrupter is feeding on. They're searching for friction, anger, irritation, submission. Anything that confirms their presence matters. The Stoic gives them none of it. You stop speaking instantly. You don't apologize. You don't roll your eyes. You don't look down or away. You simply look at them, calmly, neutrally, fully present. This kind of silence is not empty. It's dense. It creates psychological pressure without saying a word. With no resistance to push against, the interrupter suddenly has to carry the entire moment alone, and most people aren't prepared for that. They start to ramble. They lose structure. Their energy spikes, then collapses, because interruptions are powered by reaction. Remove the reaction, and the behavior has nowhere to stand. Here's the key detail most people miss. You wait. You don't jump back in the second they stop talking. You let one extra second pass, a sovereign second. That pause signals ownership. Then and only then, you continue exactly where you left off, not louder, not faster, not defensive, as if the interruption never happened. That's the part that unsettles people the most. You've communicated, without confrontation, that their outburst was irrelevant, not worth emotional acknowledgement, just a passing disturbance, like background noise that didn't alter your direction. Stoicism calls this temperance, emotional restraint under pressure. It's not suppression, it's mastery. And here's the paradox. The more calmly you hold silence, the more people listen when you speak. Because silence used with intention makes words heavier, sharper, more deliberate. In a world addicted to noise, the person who can remain still commands attention without asking for it. That's weaponized silence. Method 4. Reflective questioning, bringing awareness to the behavior. Some interruptions aren't accidental. They're patterns. When someone repeatedly talks over you, silence alone may no longer correct the behavior. In these moments, the Stoic doesn't explode and doesn't retreat. Instead, they introduce awareness. This approach uses a calm, genuine question, not sarcasm, not accusation. The goal isn't to trap the person, it's to slow them down and pull their unconscious habit into conscious space. Most people interrupt on autopilot. They feel a thought, and it escapes their mouth before reason has a chance to intervene. A well-placed question acts like a speed bump. It interrupts the interrupter. The power here is not in the words themselves, but in the tone. Curious, neutral, almost gentle. The question forces the other person to examine their intention in real time, and something fascinating usually happens. They pause. That pause is critical. It means the emotional impulse has been interrupted by reflection. They're no longer reacting. They're thinking. And once someone is thinking, the dynamic shifts. This technique also does something important socially. It signals to everyone listening that you are not playing a dominance game. You're maintaining standards. You're protecting the structure of the conversation without aggression. Stoicism values truth over theatrics. This method aligns perfectly with that principle. You're not humiliating the other person. You're offering them an off-ramp, a dignified way to correct themselves without losing face. And in many cases, they take it. They back down, they clarify. They hand the floor back to you. No raised voice, no tension, no drama. You've reclaimed authority not by force, but by clarity. And clarity, as the Stoics understood, is one of the highest forms of power in human interaction. Method 5. Calm, boundary setting. Authority without emotion. Stoicism is often mistaken for quiet endurance, but true Stoicism is not about absorbing disrespect. It's about responding to reality without emotional distortion. There are moments when someone interrupts you, not out of impulse, but aggression. In those moments, silence alone can be misread as permission. This is when the Stoic introduces a clear boundary, not with anger, but with gravity. The key is how you deliver it. Your voice stays low, slower than usual, almost flat, no sharp edges, no emotional charge. You're not correcting a person. You're correcting a situation. What makes this powerful is that you're stating a fact, not an accusation. Facts don't escalate conflict. They anchor it. When delivered calmly, they cut through noise better than volume ever could. Most people deliver boundaries with irritation, a sigh, a raised eyebrow, a defensive tone. That weakens the message. The Stoic does the opposite. They remove emotion entirely, and emotionless clarity unsettles people who are used to pushing others off balance. This approach sends a subtle but firm signal. Your words matter enough to be protected, not aggressively, not dramatically, simply because they do. And here's the deeper layer. This boundary isn't really for the other person. It's for you. It reinforces your own self-respect. Each time you calmly defend your space, you strengthen the internal standard that Stoicism is built on. People often test what they can get away with. When they meet quiet resistance instead of emotional reaction, most retreat. Not because they're defeated, but because the game has changed. You're no longer reacting, you're directing. That's calm authority. And calm authority doesn't demand respect. It naturally commands it. Method 6. Psychological mirroring. Generosity that reveals imbalance. There's a subtle form of power that most people never use because it feels counterintuitive. Instead of resisting someone's interruption, you acknowledge their emotional intensity and then step aside. This is not surrender, it's psychological mirroring. When someone cuts you off with urgency, excitement, or impatience, they're broadcasting emotion. The Stoic notices this and calmly reflects it back, without judgment, without sarcasm. By recognizing their passion or eagerness, you quietly reframe their behavior. You're no longer the one being interrupted. They're the one being emotionally exposed. This works because Stoicism views unchecked emotion as a weakness, not something to attack, but something to observe. When you gently label what's happening, you invite awareness, and awareness often dissolves excess. You remove yourself from the struggle entirely. You're no longer fighting for attention, you're granting it freely. And when attention is given instead of taken, it loses its thrill. Something fascinating happens here. Many people, once fully handed the floor, suddenly slow down. Their urgency fades. They realize they had less to say than they thought. The interruption was fueled not by insight, but by impulse. Meanwhile, you stand in contrast, calm, present, unmoved. This contrast is powerful. It places you in the role of the observer, the one who can afford patience. And patience in social dynamics signals abundance. You're not scarce, you're not rushed, you're not threatened. Stoicism teaches that you don't need to dominate a space to hold authority in it. Sometimes, stepping out of the arena is what reveals who is truly out of balance. By choosing generosity over competition, you expose the emotional asymmetry without a single confrontation. That's strategic yielding at its highest level. Method 7. Strategic pausing, slowing the interaction itself. There are moments when an interruption isn't just about words, it's about pace. The conversation is moving too fast. Emotions are rising, signals are crossing, and if it continues unchecked, clarity will be lost. This is when the Stoic does something subtle but powerful. They pause the interaction itself. Not by arguing, not by correcting tone, but by slowing time. A strategic pause resets the rhythm of the conversation. It communicates that speed does not equal importance, and urgency does not equal authority. By momentarily stopping the flow, you reclaim control of the frame. What makes this effective is intention. You're not pausing because you're overwhelmed. You're pausing because you're choosing order over chaos. That distinction is felt immediately by everyone present. In fast-moving discussions, meetings, debates, tense exchanges, the person who can slow the room becomes the anchor. Others unconsciously adjust to that pace. Breathing steadies. Voices lower. Thinking returns. Stoicism teaches that disorder thrives on momentum. Interrupt that momentum, and disorder weakens. A pause creates space for reason to re-enter. This isn't avoidance, it's leadership. You're signaling that the conversation matters enough to be handled properly, and that signal alone elevates your position without confrontation. Method 8. Weighted return. When your words land heavier. This is where everything comes together. After the pause, after the silence, after the boundary. You return. Not hurried, not defensive, not louder than before. You return with weight. Most people rush back into speech the moment they regain the floor, afraid they'll lose it again. The Stoic does the opposite. They take their time. They let the room settle. And when they speak, their words arrive slower, clearer, more deliberate. This final step is critical because it transforms interruption from a disruption into an advantage. By resuming exactly where you left off, calmly, precisely, you send a powerful signal. Your thought was never threatened. It didn't need protection through volume or speed. It simply waited. This kind of return reframes the entire interaction. The interruption becomes a footnote, not the main event, and everyone listening feels the shift. Attention sharpens. The room quiets. Why? Because composure commands respect in a way force never can. Stoicism teaches that speech gains power from restraint. Words spoken after silence carry more gravity. They land deeper. they're remembered longer. And over time, people learn something important about you. When you speak, it's worth listening. This is the quiet endgame of Stoic communication. You don't fight for airtime. You don't chase validation. You don't match emotional volatility. You remain steady. And in a world full of noise, where everyone is desperate to be heard, the person who speaks with calm precision becomes magnetic. That is the Stoic way of handling interruption. Not by overpowering others, but by mastering yourself. When silence becomes your signature, let's bring this together. Being interrupted is not the real problem. Losing yourself in the reaction, that's the problem. The Stoics understood something most modern conversations forget. You don't need to dominate a space to own it. You don't need to speak over others to be respected. And you certainly don't need to sacrifice your inner peace just to win a moment of attention. Every time someone cuts you off, you're being offered a choice. You can react, raise your voice, rush your words, fight to be heard. Or you can respond, pause, observe, and choose your move deliberately. One path creates noise. The other creates gravity. Through silence, through calm boundaries, through intentional pauses and composed returns, you signal something powerful. My value does not depend on urgency. My words are not fragile. My presence does not need to be proven. Epictetus reminded us that while the world will always test us, through people, interruptions, and disrespect, it can never force us to abandon ourselves. That decision is always ours. And here's the paradox worth remembering. When you stop chasing attention, attention begins to follow you. When you respect your own silence, others begin to respect your voice. So this week, try it. The next time someone interrupts you, don't rush. Feel the impulse, but don't obey it. Let the moment breathe. Choose composure over chaos. You may notice something surprising. People listen more closely, and your words spoken less often carry more weight. That is the quiet power of Stoicism. Not loud, not aggressive, unshakable. Remain steady. Guard your inner ground, and let your silence speak before your words ever do. If this reflection resonated with you, if you're someone who values composure over chaos, clarity over noise, then consider subscribing to this channel. We don't shout for attention. We explore Stoic wisdom, emotional mastery, and the quiet kind of strength that actually lasts. New videos are released regularly for those who want to speak less, think deeper, and move through the world with steadiness, no matter how loud it gets around them. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and walk this path with us. Not to become louder, but to become unshakable.